Republicans have gained an additional U.S. House seat for the rest of the year following a special election victory by a pro-lifer.
We cannot accept the increase of gas, of food, of medication. We cannot accept that.
Mayra Flores defeated 3 opponents, including 2 Democrats last night for the vacant seat in South Texas. Flores was born in Mexico, is the daughter of migrant workers, and is married to a U.S. Border Patrol agent. And joining me now is Vince Coglianese, editorial director at the Daily Caller. Vince, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, as you just heard, Republican Mayra Flores won in a special election down in South Texas last night, and she ran on the values of God, family, and country, and she also wants to secure the border. How significant is her win?
I think it's giant. I mean, this is the first time a Republican has won this particular district since it's existed for the last decade. And in particular, this will be the first Mexican-born woman to go into Congress, and she is a Republican. I think it represents a sea change among Hispanic voters in the United States who are very rapidly shifting away from the Democratic Party. And if you look at her district in particular, she comes from Brownsville. That's about as far south in Texas as you can go, as far south in the continental United States as you can go, right across the border from Mexico. It's a community that's 85% Hispanic. And this wasn't even close. She outraised her opponent by, I think, 16 times. And then in the end, was able to win here in this special election. And she'll hold the seat until later this year. Well, she'll run yet again in the general election. But I think it's a very big sign of what could be coming in November.
And moving on now to South Carolina, as we know, Representative Tom Rice, a 5-term Republican congressman who voted to impeach former President Donald Trump over the January 6 riots, well, he lost his re-election bid. What do you think that signals?
Well, one, I would be remiss if I didn't mention just how many great headlines can be written about this race, because the guy who beat Tom Rice is Russell Fry. So Fry Rice, that's the gift to Donald Trump on his birthday, which of course was yesterday. Trump endorsed Russell Fry in this race. He wanted to get rid of Tom Rice, especially because of that impeachment vote. And South Carolina voters obviously found that appealing. They sided with Donald Trump. They sided with his endorsed candidate. And, you know, as the media assesses every Trump endorsement, and he's lost a few, but he's won the majority of endorsements so far going into November. It demonstrates, I think, to some extent, Donald Trump still has a very big presence in Republican politics and certainly national politics.
He is still definitely the face of the Republican Party right now, would you say?
I think so. But although I will admit there are other people who are competing for that distinction, the guy who jumps to mind is Ron DeSantis in Florida, who's very much trying to, I think, take that position.
On a different note now, the House passed a bill last night to protect the U.S. Supreme Court justices and ensure their safety. Talk about the importance of that, especially as we await the decision that could overturn Roe v. Wade.
It's critical, but it's one that it took dragging Nancy Pelosi kicking and screaming in order to achieve it. It could have passed last week. She delayed it. The politics of it seem very transparent. She's been trying to run this January 6th committee, suggesting that her political opponents are some sort of threat to democracy. Meanwhile, it is true that these have been lefties who've been committing acts of violence and threatening acts of violence against pro-lifers, and especially Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was able to avoid an assassination attempt thanks to law enforcement being present at his home. That's why that bill came forward, and that's why the Senate unanimously passed it. It took a little extra time for the House to finally do it yesterday, but it comes at a really important and scary time as pro-lifers across the country are under attack. We've seen a number of fire bombings of pro-life pregnancy centers, and even earlier this week, a state legislator having his office, he's pro-life, being firebombed. It's a bad trend, and our lawmakers and government officials need to stop it as quickly as they can.
And earlier this week, the White House press secretary was asked if the president's physical and mental health is good enough to continue his political career through another presidential campaign. Now, she laughed it off and replied that she could barely keep up with President Biden. But your thoughts on that?
Well, it's pretty clear to anybody who's watched Joe Biden, certainly through the years and during this presidency, that he's lost a step. There's no question about that. And I bet you in his honest moments, if he was sitting in front of you, he'd probably tell you the same thing. But here's the reason why that question came up. It came up on a CNN interview, and that's because you're watching as the left in the United States is increasingly concerned that Joe Biden is not in any position to be president of the United States again. His approval rating is abysmal. It's the lowest it's ever been. There's not a lot of confidence that he could even win re-election. And ahead of the midterms, the chatter's already growing. The New York Times just running an article this past week that included strategists like Obama strategist David Axelrod, indicating that it doesn't look like Joe Biden is ready or capable of being president again in 2024. This has become an open conversation, not just among Republicans, but now among Democrats. And the White House is struggling to answer it, which is why you get the nervous laughter.
Well, Vince, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your time and insight.
My pleasure. Thank you, Aaron.